I died in the 7th year of my love for Enshiyu. When the bandit's knife pierced my body, I was trembling and tried to call Enshiyu, begging, "Enshiyu, help me." But a strange male voice answered the phone. Did they really call just to congratulate me on a quick and good death after such words? The call ended, and I closed my eyes from the piercing pain. At the very last moment of my life, I swore to myself that if I got a chance to be reborn, I would never love Enshiyu again, and I opened my eyes again. Enshiyu sat next to me, about to lean closer. I pushed him away forcefully, causing him to sit up abruptly in bed. He glanced at me with a cold expression and asked, "Yi Shuang, what are you doing?" But I didn't care at all. Grabbing my smartphone, I frantically checked the date. It was our wedding day, and the realization of what was happening made my head spin. Before I could come to my senses, and Shiyu's phone rang. "Shiyu, when are you coming to pick me up? Didn't we agree to go to the movies together?" A painfully familiar voice came from the receiver. I heard Shiyu whisper back to Wang Qi. I immediately got out of bed, quickly getting dressed. "I'll be there right now," and finally returned to reality. He grabbed Wang Qi's wrist, his voice slightly hoarse. "And Shiyu, wait for me for 20 minutes. I have something extremely important to take care of," and Shiyu frowned, grabbing my hand. "What are you up to now? You forced me to play games with you just to avoid going to Wang Qi. And that's all? Just don't even think about telling me you're going anywhere again." "No," I sighed and stepped back. "And Shiyu, I want to divorce you," I said, even though Shiyu had been in poor health since birth. "Yi Shuang, what kind of stupid joke are you making?" "I'm not joking at all. I'm absolutely serious this time," I replied, taking my phone out of my pocket. After quickly typing a message for my lawyer, I turned the screen towards him. "Let this despicable parasite finally see everything. Zhang Liu, I want a divorce. Prepare the agreement immediately." And Shiyu stared at the screen. He squinted slightly and looked straight at me. This face, which I had loved for so many years, cut me more sharply than any knife because I had loved Enshiyu for 20 years. Ever since kindergarten, I've followed him everywhere like a persistent, impossible-to-get-rid-of tail, but Enshiyu never gave me a kind word. I was always met with nothing but his icy expression and the complete heartlessness of even the most cursory glances, because there were always too many admirers around him. But I was too stupid to know how to attract his attention in any other way, and therefore I used only one method. I naively thought that this would go on forever until Wang Qi came into our lives and destroyed everything to the ground on that rainy day. Returning home on my usual schedule, I found my father with an unfamiliar woman, and next to them stood a boy my age. He brought this couple straight to our house and, guiltily lowering his head before his mother, declared, "This is my first love, which I once gave up for the sake of my family, and now I have achieved my goal. I must fulfill this long-held dream and divorce you, even if I already have a child from another man." His determination seemed unwavering. There was no turning back. The grief-stricken mother cried all night, and at dawn, left unattended, she stepped off the roof. My father, consumed with rage, waited impatiently for his first love to cross our threshold, and from that day on, I hated his choice and Wang Qi even more. But the most brutal betrayal was yet to come. When I entered the library in search of Enshiyu, I found him in the corner, clinging to Wang Qi's shoulder. He gently touched his lips with a kiss, and at that very moment my familiar world collapsed completely, after which Grandfather N, who had fallen seriously ill, forced his grandson to marry me. After the wedding, Enshiyu accidentally found my sketches with thousands of images of him and understood the depth of my feelings, but it did not touch him. He only decided that I manipulated his grandfather. That's why he forced me to marry him, turning our life together into a battlefield. And Shiyu lit lanterns for Wang Qi, and in return I groaned his rare sports car. And Shiyu took Wang Qi on vacation, and I bought out the entire hotel to ruin their trip. He celebrated Wang Qi's birthday, and I put a cockroach in the birthday cake until we made a strange pact. And Shiyu could visit Wang Qi on the condition that he would play along with my whims each time beforehand, as if we were doomed to torment each other for the rest of our lives. I laughed out loud even though my heart was bleeding with pain, because I alone knew that this mutual mockery was just a desperate attempt to hold on to a love that I could not let go. And only in the face of death did I finally realize the doom of some feelings, promising myself in this life to erase from my memory Enshiyu, Wang Qi, and all the bitterness of past years. Soon, a lawyer from the Zizhuang Pavilion entered the room. "Mr. Yi, Mr. N, here is the prepared divorce agreement." Placing the documents on the table, he added, "Please read them." And Shiyu was well aware of my feelings and simply refused to believe that I was serious. He waited for me to finish playing out this latest scene, but without the slightest hesitation I signed, shocking him. Quickly coming to his senses, he ran his eyes over the clauses on the division of property and shares in capital, checking every detail. White Yi Shuang, his voice was slightly tense. Are you really going to do this? I slowly turned to face him. A bitter mockery played on my lips. What could be more real? What, are you scared? Didn't expect this. Didn't expect that? And Shiyu smiled bitterly as if he just heard a ridiculous joke. Yi Shuang, this marriage is a prison for me and every second I spend with you is unbearable. I'm so tired, then just sign. What are you waiting for? And Shiyu, I said easily. And Shiyu remained icy. He picked up a pen and decisively signed it, then coldly threw the document in front of me. Yi Shuang, remember this is your own choice, so don't you dare regret it later, he said as the lawyer took the signed papers. We acted fairly and legally, but it took a whole month for the divorce to be finalized, during which each of us could withdraw our application. With a smile on his face, and Shiyu said as he parted, if you change your mind in a month, you can always return the money and settle any disputes. You'll still come back to me. His voice carried the confidence of a man who's made up his mind. Yi Shuang, if you really are leaving forever. Then I'll cut off my head and kick you in the balls, I replied, turned around and walked away, leaving him standing there, fully confident that I would give in at the last moment. And Shiyu was deeply mistaken because I wasn't trying to attract his attention at all. I was just waiting for this month to pass so I could completely disappear from his life. I spent the next few days at home packing, while my social media feed was filled with sweet photos of Shiyu and Wang Qi. They strolled together by the sea under the rays of the sunset and enjoyed romantic candlelit dinners at the Ban Shan restaurant, while I wandered aimlessly through the shops. Their photos together were adorned with hundreds of comments from mutual friends. Traveling again? Why do you two act like newlyweds every day? Someone joked in the comments that he had already eaten enough of their dog food for life and that his teeth would soon rot from so much sugar. It's just a pity that I never managed to win Shiyu's heart, although I understood perfectly well that all these photos that were put on display were taken only to hurt me. Before, this hurt me terribly and kept me awake at night, but now I looked at it with absolute calm and without a shadow of emotion. Since I had made my final decision, after the divorce we would never see each other again, but 3 days later the devil made me go to a traditional family dinner. Before, I would never have set foot in this house, but this time, for some reason, I went and upon entering the noisy villa, saw Shiyu warmly greeting Wang Qi and the elders. The children ran around them, loudly calling them uncle and aunt, and they both laughed loudly, but I just silently looked away and smiled bitterly. I was Shiyu's legal husband, but with the exception of my late grandfather, no one here recognized me, thinking that I was just taking someone else's place and looking down on me. My face was not particularly beautiful, and before I would have run away from here, but now I suddenly realized how much was happening behind my back. They had all become one family long ago, and when I pushed the door to the main hall, the smile on my face grew even wider, while Shiyu's parents immediately darkened. Sister, and Shiyu raised her chin in disdain. Weren't you planning to divorce Shiyu? What the hell did you come here for? Wang Qi looked at me with a smile, deliberately trying to offend me. My brother is putting on a show again, but Shiyu is already fed up with these childish games. And Shiyu remained icy silent, and his sister added, even though the divorce hasn't been officially finalized yet, you're an outsider here and have no say. The rest of her relatives immediately supported her, recalling the past. If it weren't for that old man's stupid mistake, would Shiyu have married you? He and Wang Qi were made for each other, and you ruined it all. Yeah, Shiyu couldn't stand him from the very beginning, and this clingy guy is still trying to play the drama, although he has no shame or conscience. I silently looked at this close-knit family that hated me so unanimously. Surrounded by their cold gazes, I only thought of one thing: the family really knows how to destroy people. Grandfather, you told me before you died that if I marry Shiyu, I will finally find my happiness. I mentally addressed the old man. You called me a stupid and hurt guy, but you forgot to warn me that the person I love will bring me so much pain. And Shiyu hated our marriage and me, turning our life together into torture. But now, after experiencing the nightmare of his past death, I finally let him go. After spending a long time at the cemetery near my grandfather's grave, I expressed everything that had accumulated in my soul, firmly deciding to start a new life. Suddenly, I heard the sound of heels behind me, and turning around, I saw Wang Qi rapidly approaching, for whom I no longer had any strength. But Wang Qi only grinned mockingly and angrily swung at my late grandfather's jade pendant, knocking it out of my hands. Taken by surprise, I rushed to save him, but Wang Qi roughly pushed me, and I fell with all my might onto the wooden family tablets, feeling a sharp pain pierce my body. At that moment, someone who had arrived grabbed Wang Qi by the wrist. "Are you completely crazy?" apologized to Grandpa immediately. But Wang Qi merely waved his hands smugly. "Why should I? This old man is to blame for everything, and if it weren't for him, the position of head of the family would have belonged to me long ago." "Oh, I'm so scared," he feigned fear upon noticing me. "If Shiyu knew how you feel about his grandfather's memory, but then, you're the spitting image of your worthless mother." Every word he said burned my heart like hot oil. "You poor loser, why haven't you died yet? Your mother's probably been waiting for you in the next world." It was more than I could bear to hear my mother being insulted, and I, no longer holding back, punched him in the face with all my might. Wang Qi clearly did not expect such a rebuff and, stunned by the blow, turned pale with rage, after which he rushed at me with a wild cry, clutching my tie. We rolled across the floor of the birthing hall, knocking over heavy wooden structures and raising columns of dust. In the heat of the fight, Wang Qi grabbed the urn containing Grandfather An's ashes and angrily hit me on the head with it, cutting my forehead until it bled deeply. The pain was so intense that I could barely open my eyes, and the fallen urn shattered and the ashes scattered all over the floor, mixing with my blood. The noise and shouts instantly attracted everyone in the villa, who came running to the sound of the pogrom. Seeing the broken urn and us covered in dust and blood, the relatives gasped, and Shiyu's face, which had just arrived, was distorted with rage. His voice was chilling. "Yi Shuang, are you completely mad? This is the ancestral hall. How dare you cause chaos here?" Before I could open my mouth in pain, Wang Qi immediately fell to his knees, playing the victim. "Shiyu, I just wanted to pick up the fallen pendant," and he attacked me with his fists. When I tried to defend myself, he himself broke the urn with my grandfather's ashes and tried to hurt me. And Shiyu's relatives immediately shouted in unison, looking at me as if they were ready to tear me to pieces. "Execute this madman according to the laws of the family." And Shiyu didn't even listen to my excuses and said curtly to the servants, "Bring the family whip. Today I will personally beat the crap out of him for desecrating the shrine." The first crime is disrespect for elders, the second is beating a guest without cause, and the third is an open assault. There was such rage in my eyes that it seemed as if I was ready to tear them apart with my bare hands. I breathed heavily, barely holding back the curses that were ready to escape my lips. Finally, my strength left me and everything swam before me before I fell into darkness, hearing only Shiyu's cold voice. "Throw him out of here so as not to stain my eyes," flashed through my mind, and when I came to my senses again, I found myself lying in bed in our villa. There was an oppressive silence all around, but a searing pain in my back instantly brought me back to reality, reminding me of the cruel punishment that Shiyu had personally meted out. Gritting my teeth until they creaked, I tried to raise myself up on my elbows, but the careless movement caused the wound to flare up with a new wave of pain. As I soaked the cotton wool with disinfectant, I bit my lip until it bled, trying not to make a sound as cold sweat poured down my face in large beads. I spent the next week bedridden like a living corpse, the fresh scars on my back constantly opening with the slightest movement, while Shiyu never once came to see me. But the news about him and Wang Qi continued to sting me like a poisonous snake. They would choose diamond watches at auction or boast about their new purchase on social media. As their 6th anniversary approached, Wang Qi prepared a grand party on a cruise ship, personally designing the festive outfit. Previously, I didn't even have the courage to throw away things that reminded me of Shiyu, and for years I kept his secret photos and stacks of letters that he never opened. Having finally collected all this old stuff into one bag, I resolutely headed towards the trash can, but at that moment the door suddenly swung open and Shiyu entered the room. He glanced at the contents of the urn and narrowed his eyes coldly. "Are you still throwing these childish tantrums?" "I'm not a clown to you, Shiyu, don't you understand that yet?" I answered calmly, looking him straight in the eyes. My voice sounded firm and without its usual strain, causing Shiyu to freeze for a second in surprise. He clearly didn't expect such a rebuff from me, but then his phone rang. It was another video call from Wang Qi, and Shiyu, after casting a long glance at me, left the room. On my birthday, my friends decided to throw a small party at a private club to at least clear my head a little and help me forget about the recent nightmare. We were about to cut the birthday cake when suddenly the heavy doors of the hall swung open and a group led by Shiyu and Wang Qi appeared on the threshold. Their retinue immediately began to loudly complain, looking around the room. "What kind of gathering is this? Clear this place immediately, we need it." Clutching a glass of champagne in my hand with fingers so white that my knuckles cracked, I looked coldly at the impudent, uninvited guests. It was obvious that they had come here on purpose to ruin my holiday and deprive me of even the tiniest chance to be at peace. My friends immediately stood in front of me, trying to defend me. "Listen, we booked this room in advance, so find yourself another place." But the women in their group only laughed contemptuously, throwing a printed lease agreement on the table. "Look carefully, this club belongs to Angie and only what she wants will be here." One of my friends turned purple with anger, but Wang Qi only smiled sweetly, pressing himself against Shiyu's shoulder. "Shiyu, I really like this room, kick them out." And Shiyu remained silent, allowing Wang Qi to dispose of others' lives at his own whim. With just one nod from Shiyu, his guards immediately began throwing us out of the hall, trampling the festive decorations and smearing the cake on the walls. I rushed to the wall, trying to save at least the last photographs, but someone from the crowd pushed me hard in the back. I flew straight into a pyramid of champagne glasses, crashing it to the floor with a bang, accompanied by screams of frightened people. Hundreds of shards of glass were embedded in my body, and cold wine mixed with the blood that was soaking my suit. Through the haze before my eyes, I saw for the last time how Shiyu carefully brushed a speck of dust from Wang Qi's shoulder, as if he were a fragile treasure. When I came to, I was again surrounded by the white walls of the hospital room and the worried faces of my loyal friends. "Yi Shuang, are you completely out of your mind? He humiliates you at every opportunity. Are you really going to tolerate this jerk any longer?" one of them exclaimed indignantly. I mechanically rubbed the bandages on my hands, feeling my wounded heart ache, but for the first time in so many years, my soul felt surprisingly light. "I've already filed for divorce, I just have to wait a few days until it's official," I answered quietly. The friends exchanged glances and breathed a sigh of relief. "You've finally seen the light. With your looks and personality, you'll find someone better than this blind woman." They were noisily bombarding me with advice on how to have fun after a divorce and which 100 beauties I should introduce to when the door to the ward swung open. And Shiyu stood at the door, his icy voice cutting through the silence. 100 beauties, Yi Shuang, I see you've completely lost your sense of shame." I didn't even blink, looking at him without the same trepidation. "What business is it of yours? I'm not interfering in your relationship with Wang Qi, so leave me alone." And Shiyu frowned, clearly not used to the fact that I was no longer looking up at him, and threw some papers on the nightstand. "I advise you not to make plans ahead of time until we receive the divorce certificate," he said as a parting shot. But I was no longer much concerned about his threats, because only a few days remained until the long-awaited freedom. I was no longer going to cling to ghostly memories and beg for crumbs of other people's attention. All these years I had been a prisoner of my own blind love, but now this nightmare was finally coming to an end. Let Shiyu take his precious Wang Qi and go to hell. I have earned the right to start life with a clean slate, without pain, humiliation, and endless waiting. Ahead of me lay a completely different world, in which there was no longer a place for this man. I watched him go in silence, feeling a heavy stone finally fall from my shoulders. The countdown to my release was over, and the doors of a new life opened before me. I was ready to take a step forward and leave this story behind forever. "You deserve your 7 beautiful ladies," I said as a parting shot, and without turning around for another second, I walked proudly away, feeling his heavy gaze on my back. Once in the car, I pulled the divorce agreement out of my bags with trembling fingers, double-checked every line, and carefully put the documents back before handing them to my lawyer. Without regret, I transferred all rights to real estate, luxury cars, shares, and a cruise ship to a lawyer, transferring all assets into safe cash funds, the sight of which finally brought long-awaited peace to my soul. Having secured a financial safety net, I spent a few more days under the doctor's observation, and on the day of discharge, I returned to an empty house wherein Shiyu and Wang Qi were already waiting for me. In the living room, bathed in the soft light of the sunset, Wang Qi gently wrapped his arms around Shiyu's neck, while Shiyu gently touched his cheek and placed a light kiss on the top of his head. I left this crumb of tenderness, which I had been chasing after unsuccessfully for 12 years, behind me with a light heart, slamming the front door behind me so loudly that we both froze in fear. And Shiyu turned around abruptly, and for a moment confusion flashed in his eyes, but I was already standing at the threshold, clenching my fingers into fists until my palms hurt. A cold, mocking smile played across my face. After all, was my appearance really so disgusting that I had to endure this? I thought, watching Shiyu's face distort. I ran my thumb over my lips and smiled bitterly. Didn't those kisses we shared before seem even more disgusting to you? And at that moment, there were no more blind illusions or pain left in my eyes. I raised my head, feeling incredibly light, and mentally swore to myself, raising 3 fingers in a sign of absolute determination. I swear, if I ever look at Shiyu with love again in this life, let me burn with shame. At this thought, Shiyu's pupils narrowed and his heart skipped a beat. He clearly didn't expect to hear such harsh words from me, but then Wang Qi cried out in fear and pressed himself against his chest. "Shiyu, I'm scared," causing Shiyu to immediately turn all his attention to him. With a heavy sigh, Shiyu gently stroked Wang Qi's hair. "Don't be afraid, I'll cook something now," and, casting one last cold glance at me, disappeared into the kitchen. I went up to my room, but the silence behind me weighed on my shoulders, and standing by the window, I kept thinking about how easily the years of false happiness had been destroyed. Having spent several days in seclusion until the very moment of the divorce, I hardly left my room, gathering the last of my mental strength. The night before, my former classmates invited me to a reunion, and deciding that this would be a good end to my past life, I crossed the threshold of the noisy hall. The class president immediately ran up to me joyfully. "Yi Shuang, my God, we haven't seen you in ages, come in quickly." And I nodded curtly in response, sitting down at an empty table. Before I could even take a sip of water, curious classmates surrounded me from all sides. "Listen, Yi Shuang, is it true that you married Shiyu himself? We're still in shock. You two barely tolerated each other in school, so why this wedding? It's probably just rumors, right?" came the questions, one after another. I mechanically ran my finger along the rim of the glass, feeling the icy cold, and forced out a calm, even smile. "It's the honest truth. We really did get married. But we're in the process of getting a divorce right now," I added, and the effect on the group was so sobering, as if an ice ceiling had suddenly collapsed into the room. The silence that followed was broken only by the quiet clinking of glasses, while the classmates exchanged awkward glances, clearly unsure how to react to such an unexpected confession. Someone shook their head uncertainly. "What a pity. We thought that your school fairy tale would end with a wedding for the ages," while others began to recall details of past years. "Come on, did you really think this was all sincere? Yi Shuang had been following him around for so many years, it's obvious he was just trying to tie him down," someone said from the corner. I froze when I heard this, because it seemed to me that I had been so skillfully hiding my feelings all these years, but from the outside, it turns out, everything was clearly visible. The conversation at the table became lively, and classmates began vying with each other to share memories. "Have you forgotten how in high school those girls laughed at Shiyu behind his back, and Yi Shuang immediately attacked them with his fists? Do you remember when his mother died? He rushed to the hospital in tears when he found out that Shiyu had been in an accident and urgently needed donor blood. And what about that incident in his senior year when Shiyu's camera, with all his application materials, fell to the bottom of a deep winter lake? Yi Shuang didn't even think twice about it. He immediately jumped into the icy water. After that, he spent almost a month in the hospital with severe pneumonia. If it weren't for his crazy love, who would have taken such a risk for a stranger?" Listening to these other people's memories of my own past, I felt a suffocating heaviness growing in my chest, which made me want to howl. Unable to bear this barrage of strange voices, I abruptly rose from the table, throwing out a short "excuse me," and quickly walked towards the restroom. After washing my face with cold water and coming to my senses a little, I was about to go back out into the corridor when suddenly a familiar voice was heard behind the door. And Shiyu stood there, his icy and piercing gaze directed straight at me. "So, everything they said in the hall just now is true." His voice sounded muffled, as if coming from the very depths of his chest, but I only chuckled coldly, forcing myself to straighten up to my full height. "What difference does it make now whether it was true or not? The main thing is that the person you love is Wang Qi, not me," I said, stepping around him and not waiting for an answer. Having rushed out of the hotel onto the night street, I hoped to catch a taxi, but right at the entrance, and Shiyu's familiar car stopped with a screech of brakes. The driver's side window slowly rolled down, revealing in Shiyu's pale face, whose voice was emotionless, "Get in the car, we need to talk." Silently opening the back door, I sat down in the seat, feeling a light trail of the same oppressive scent of perfume that I so strongly associated with years of pain. We drove in complete silence while familiar night landscapes flashed past the windows, like two parallel lines that were never destined to intersect again. Before we could even reach the villa, and Shiyu's phone started ringing off the hook, and he took off with a bang, barely slamming the car door. Intrigued by the strange noise of screams coming from the air, I followed him all the way to the 12th floor of the neighboring apartment complex, where a real drama was unfolding. The hallway was strewn with rose petals and flickering candles, creating the atmosphere of a cheap romantic play in the middle of which a nightmare was unfolding. In the corner, Wang Qi was trembling in fear, and next to him, a crazy woman in a long evening dress was furiously waving a sharp fruit knife in front of his face. Her voice broke into a hysterical shriek. "Wang Qi, that bastard in Shiyu is married. He'll never give you a proper title or future. I've been pursuing you for so many years, why won't you give me a chance? If you don't agree to be with me right now, we'll die here together," she screamed, pressing the blade to his throat. Noticing in Shiyu appearing at the door, Wang Qi cried out with renewed vigor, "Shiyu, save me, that crazy Zhang Xiaoma wants to kill me." Upon seeing in Shiyu, the woman turned to him, her eyes filled with a mad gleam. "Don't come any closer, Shiyu, otherwise I swear I'll cut him to shreds." And Shiyu was as pale as a sheet, but for Wang Qi's safety, he took a step back, trying to speak as gently as possible. "Zhang Xiaomai, put down the knife, you know that you can't force someone to be nice." But as soon as he mentioned Wang Qi's name with such concern, Zhang Xiaomai completely lost her mind and, sharply turning the tip of the knife towards me, screamed, "You care so much about him, but you abandoned your legal husband, Yi Shuang. All of you here deserve to die." Blinded by jealousy and madness, she rushed forward with an angry cry, aiming straight at my chest. "Since you can tolerate the thought of spending your entire life with Yi Shuang, why can't Wang Qi be with me?" Zhang Xiaomai screamed, while in Shiyu's face twisted with cold rage. "Because I know what it's like to be married to someone who doesn't love you," and Shiyu replied sharply. "And believe me, it's pure hell. Every second in a marriage like this is like being on death row with no escape," he continued. "Do you really want to do the same to Wang Qi, forcing him to be by your side? You will condemn him to exactly the same endless pain and torment for the rest of his days," he said, causing me to clench my palms in the shadows until they hurt. I knew perfectly well that our marriage was a cage for him, but to hear it straight from his lips, to realize that every minute with me was torture for him, cut my heart like a knife. However, these words did not convince the crazy Zhang Xiaomai at all. Her eyes turned bloodshot and her patience finally snapped. "I don't care what you say, I only want Wang Qi, and if I don't get him, we'll all die here together," she shrieked, raising the knife which gleamed in the lamplight right above the frightened boy's head. The next moment, and Shiyu rushed forward and, without the slightest hesitation, shielded Wang Qi, taking the blade straight to his stomach, causing bright red blood to spurt out. "Shiyu!" Wang Qi screamed shrilly, while in Shiyu's face instantly turned white and his forehead broke out in cold sweat from the pain. But even as he fell to his knees when the police finally burst into the room and subdued Zhang Xiaomai, he continued to convulsively squeeze her wrist, preventing her from harming Wang Qi. Wang Qi rushed to his aid, sobbing and hugging him by the shoulders. "Shiyu, hold on, I beg you, divorce this Yi Shuang tomorrow and we'll be together." "I can't," and Shiyu managed to squeeze out, breathing heavily. "Yi Shuang hasn't given me a divorce yet, he's still holding me back." "But I love you, Wang Qi. If there is a next life, I will definitely choose only you and not obey my grandfather," he whispered, losing consciousness. Standing in the shadow of the doorway, I silently watched this scene. He still believed that I was just playing out another drama for attention, even as he slipped into unconsciousness. "How wrong you are," and Shiyu, I thought with a bitter smile, turning towards the exit just as the warning light above the operating room went out. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning when the tired surgeon came out to us and said wearily, "The wound turned out to be shallow. We got him to the hospital in time, so the patient will fully recover in a month." I didn't go into the room, I just silently turned around and left, and the next day I packed my things and finally moved out of our shared villa. After spending a sleepless night among boxes and suitcases, I carefully put everything in its place so that with the first rays of the sun I could go to the registry office. "Congratulations on your release," the bureau employee said with a smile, handing me the treasured red divorce certificate, which I immediately carefully tucked into my bag. At that very moment, my 12-year obsession finally came to an end. I took my wedding ring off my finger and placed it in a velvet box along with the divorce papers. That dull mark on my skin was exactly the same as in Shiyu's entire stay in my life, deep, but fading under the onslaught of time. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, and Shiyu was indifferently sorting through his work papers, not even raising his head at the sound of the door opening. "Why are you here so early?" "I needed to stop by the registry office this morning and finally pick up the divorce papers we put off last time," I answered calmly, looking at the man on the bed. And Shiyu frowned, feeling irritation rising in his throat. "Yi Shuang, I'm warning you, my patience is running out and this is your last childish game. Stop playing around." I didn't argue and silently put the box on the nightstand, and when he looked up, there was neither reproach nor love in my eyes, only absolute, ringing emptiness. For a second, his heart skipped a beat from a strange, sticky feeling of anxiety, because there was no longer a drop of the former warmth and adoration left in my gaze. At that moment, the phone rang and Wang Qi fluttered into the room with a container in his hands. "Shiyu, I made your favorite porridge," causing Shiyu to immediately dismiss the surging doubts. "Okay, leave your gifts and get out of here. Wang Qi will be here soon. He doesn't want to look at you," he said coldly, pushing the box to the edge of the table. I just turned around silently and walked out, exposing my face to the warm sunlight streaming through the window curtains of the hospital corridor. 12 years of blind love ended here and now, and leaving this ashes behind, I whispered only one word: goodbye. Without looking back, I left the hospital alone, took my last things to the airport, and blocked all of Inshiyu's contacts before boarding the plane. From then on, our paths diverged forever, although Inshiyu himself spent another half-month in a hospital bed under the watchful eye of Wang Qi, who was fluttering around him. Every day, Wang Qi carefully looked after him, but for some reason, a strange, suffocating emptiness grew in Inshiyu's chest day after day, as if he had lost something invaluable. At first, he pushed these thoughts away, assuring himself that he had finally gotten rid of the annoying presence, but days passed, and the silence around him became deafening. He kept looking up at the door of the ward, subconsciously expecting someone to burst in with the usual reproaches, but no one ever showed up. "Shiyu, drink some soup. I asked Auntie to make it according to a special recipe," Wang Qi said tenderly, bringing the spoon to his lips. But Inshiyu mechanically opened his mouth, his glassy gaze fixed on the empty door, until Wang Qi, with barely concealed jealousy, tugged at his hand. "Are you waiting for someone?" "No, you imagined it," and Shiyu immediately cut him off coldly, looking away and trying to hide the rising anxiety. Wang Qi bit his lip, unable to hide his hurt. "Shiyu, you're waiting for your ex-husband to come visit you, right?" And Shiyu frowned, exclaiming irritably, "Are you delusional? Why would I even wait for that sucker?" "It's just, I find it strange," Wang Qi muttered quietly, lowering his eyes. "He was always following you around, and now he hasn't even called or stopped by after that incident." These words made Inshiyu's fingers clench convulsively under the hospital blanket. Indeed, before, Yi Shuang would have raised the whole world up in arms over a simple scratch, but now he silently brought the divorce papers, threw down some box, and disappeared without a trace, leaving not even a shadow behind. Had he really become so indifferent? This sudden thought pierced his soul like a sharp splinter, causing his heart to pound in panic. Noticing the change in his expression, Wang Qi immediately tried to smooth things over. "Come on, Shiyu, he's probably just busy with his new stupid ideas." "What other fabrications?" And Shiyu said coldly, though the recent words about 100 beautiful ladies still surfaced in his head. "Well, remember, he was planning on finding new girlfriends. What if he now has a new life and a new love?" Wang Qi said hesitantly. "Shut up!" and Shiyu shouted, his face darkening with rage, causing Wang Qi to stumble back in fear. Breathing heavily, and Shiyu tried to smooth over the outburst of anger. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lose my temper. It's just that my head is splitting from all this." But that farewell look in my clear eyes kept popping up in my memory again and again. Absolutely calm, alien, and infinitely distant, as if there was nothing in common between us anymore. On the day of my discharge from the hospital, I seemed a little impatient. I hurried back to the villa and opened the door. The room was quiet, very dark and empty. I raised my eyebrows. In the next room, I shouted Yi Shuang, but no one answered. When I turned on the light, I discovered a thick layer of dust had formed in the house. It seems like I've been away for a while, I thought as I entered the living room. On the tea dispenser, I saw a personal box, the very gift she'd left before she left when I was leaving the hospital. The assistant asked me when I would pack my things. He was reluctant, but eventually agreed. At that moment, he picked up the box, but when he opened it, the contents suddenly made him feel uneasy. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a hand. What's going on? I opened the divorce papers, and the card with my name was covered by an identical card. The date matched the day I was injured. I stared at the red book, my fingers shaking uncontrollably. I was probably thinking, I'm not doing this, I'm not acting, I'm not really him. I imagined myself standing in the room, holding the divorce papers in my hand, trembling slightly from the strain. The red-tipped sword reflects in the cool light of the lamps. The Civil Affairs Bureau stamp is like a splinter in my eye, heralding the end of this marriage. I'll keep looking around and even suspect it's a fake. Moreover, just touching this document is truly unbearable. So many years of love, have I really let it go forever? Will this thought ever come back to me? Perhaps I should take a deep breath or try to calm down. Then I'll immediately pick up the phone and call the assistant. His voice will be cold. Let people check where she is. The assistant has probably never heard me so unruly and will immediately start searching. But half an hour later, his answer will make me cry. A month ago, she became a flight attendant on international flights. Her destination was unknown, all her social media accounts were blocked, and all her mobile phone numbers and bank cards were canceled. I can imagine how I felt when I heard that. My fingers were clenched tightly and visibly white. I probably didn't dare believe it. I hung up, rushed up to the second floor, and threw open the bedroom door. The room was completely empty. The bed was perfectly made, without a single wrinkle. The closet was empty, all her clothes were gone. All the things she'd previously arranged on the table had vanished. All that remained was a letter from Gu Lingling, lying quietly there. The envelope bore only a few words for me. My hands were shaking. Panic was threatening to overwhelm me. I quickly opened the envelope, and inside was just one short sentence. And Shiyu, I really did leave this time. I wish you happiness, no hard feelings, no regrets, no further explanations, I just... Softly and happily, I step away from your life. The door was pushed again. A wind blew through the cracks. With light steps, Wang Qi stepped inside, but I didn't even move. The atmosphere was such that I felt completely out of place. Then I felt a surge of excitement. The sounds all around seemed ringing. Lying on my arm, Wang Qi said this bedroom was the best and that they would live here in the future. He had waited too long for this day. Perhaps I was returning to reality like a deity from a trance. Looking at Wang Qi, I didn't want to be the same. My heart wasn't filled with smoke and my eyes weren't free. I collapsed on the sofa by the window. It used to be her favorite spot. She always loved reading there. The afternoon sun poured down on her, leaving a soft golden glow on her stomach. But now the sofa was empty. Wang Qi probably hadn't noticed my absence. Having received the answer I wanted, I moved in with my luggage that same afternoon. He'll be in a good mood. He'll order the curtains and clothes changed, and he'll take care of that one sofa. He'll even replace my carefully chosen dishes with his favorite style, mocking my old-fashioned habits. None of this suited Wang Qi, so he threw my porcelain collection straight into the trash. Looking at the shards, my heart must have been accidentally pierced. Perhaps I would have remembered the past. I used to hold these plates carefully and look at him tenderly. And Shiyu, look at this pattern. Does it look like that painting on the wall behind our school? But he probably just waved it off out of boredom. Now he didn't even have a chance to laugh at me. At night, I sat alone in the office, clutching a glass of whiskey. The alcohol burns my throat, but it doesn't dull the strange feeling in my heart. After Wang Qi moved into the villa, life became more lively, but I still felt like something was missing. I probably never even considered it before. I used to hate her persistence, but now that it was completely gone, I was starting to miss her. Miss the perfectly temperature coffee she put on my table every morning. Miss those nights when I stayed up late. I recalled how she'd secretly snort into my shoulder and even missed her stubborn gaze during our arguments. This realization would probably have annoyed me. After all, Wang Qi's considerateness, good manners, and impeccable sense of humor during our time together. They made me feel like a spectator at a carefully orchestrated performance where every gesture was played like a sure thing. Just like now, standing by the window, I watch Wang Qi smilingly plant his favorite chrysanthemum. Right in the garden at his feet lay a small, trampled sapling, the very one she had once planted. Wang Qi would probably look at me and smile his usual smile, as if carefully measuring the perfect angle. Perhaps at that moment, I suddenly realized I'd never truly understood Wang Qi. The next day, while setting up the office, I stumbled upon a folder and a tattered notebook with a long history slipped out of a slot. I was a little confused. I'd never used such a notebook in my life. I picked it up and opened it to the first page. I noticed Shiyu didn't eat breakfast today. I secretly put a sandwich on his desk. I hope he doesn't notice. My breathing evened out at these words. I must have thought, this is my diary, where did it go? I pointed at the empty space and kept reading. I saw myself dancing and spinning. I secretly slipped some medication into his locker and he bumped into me. He was cold and asked if I was being dramatic. I had to say yes. How I envy you. God knows I was dying of grief. I saw my mother leave and my father bring that woman and Wang Qi into the house. I cried in this very room. I seriously thought about him. And Shiyu, can you hug me? When I saw the date of our wedding anniversary, I remembered how he went back to Wang Qi. Then I threw the cake in the trash. But I still couldn't resist reading in the middle of the night. I finished the notes alone and it hurt. Turning page after page every night, my eyes gradually blurred with tears. The sincerity of these lines was so strong. It turns out that where I didn't see, she was so humble and stubbornly loved me, and I simply trampled on her feelings. I was stuck in this mess. I probably grabbed my car keys in a rage and ran out of the house, intending to go to the airport and check all the flights. I desperately wanted to turn around and find her anywhere, but I only ran into the yard. The footsteps suddenly faded as reality sank in. I'm sorry, am I really going to regret this? Flashed through my mind. Will she believe me now? The night wind blew stronger. I stood in the empty courtyard, suddenly realizing that some things cannot be returned once they are lost forever. I must have returned to the study. I sat down on the wide leather windowsill and opened the diary again, lightly clutching its pages with my fingers. There are several boys in class today. They were whispering behind my back that I'd cheated on the exam and had a ton of money at home since I'd just become student council president. I was furious and started fighting them. The teacher noticed. I fought all day, but I don't regret anything. Why do they dare say such things? It's my own breath. He should have remembered that. That day after school, he looked at me with that same expression. Standing in the hallway, he laughed at me and started an argument again. Su Jiaheng, can you stop acting so sloppy all day? And I just looked at the floor, saying nothing in response. It turns out I'd always been on his side. My throat tightened and that suffocating feeling wouldn't go away. I saw myself in a car accident. The hospital urgently needed blood and I secretly went for a transfusion. The nurse then told me I was donating too much and it was harmful to my health. But I knew Shiyu was still waiting for me, so I kept insisting. Later, I felt very dizzy, and when I came to, I heard that his life was no longer in danger. Good, I squeezed my fingers so hard the paper cracked in my palm. When he woke up after that accident, the doctor should have mentioned that the blood that saved him cost the man a tremendous amount of effort. But when he asked who did it, the doctor only said it was a student who wished to remain anonymous. It was me. I almost died for him, but he didn't even get a simple thank you. My chest tightened as if an invisible hand were squeezing it. The pain was almost unbearable. I flipped through the diary further and the handwriting on the pages became increasingly rough. My emotions grew with every word. Today was Shiyu's birthday. On that quiet night, I spent a whole month secretly crafting a rabbit-shaped bamboo lamp. My fingers were scratched by the bamboo branches, but in the end, I still didn't dare send the gift. He hated me so much, this craft would probably only irritate and anger him. That rabbit lamp, he should have seen it in the closet, stuck in a box full of dust. He probably would have thought it was just an old children's thing. I was patient and cautious, loved him with all my heart, but didn't even dare utter a word of my feelings out loud. I probably remembered the ridicule of those old classmates all too well. At the class reunion, I coldly denied everything and then ran away because I didn't want him to know the truth. Because I knew that even if he found out, he wouldn't care. This thought made my heart stop painfully outside the office door. Wang Qi peered quietly into the room through the narrow crack. See how he's holding onto that diary? Love seemed like a lie to me, and my fingers dug deep into my palms. A fragment of a phrase rang out in the silence, making me think, how can I leave? It all still felt too piercing. The next morning, Wang Qi brought coffee to the table. And he began to speak. Shiyu, when I was packing my things yesterday, I found that my brother left a lot of things here. Should I throw them away right away? And Shiyu cut into the steak and replied coldly, leave it alone, don't touch his things. Wang Qi's face twisted in displeasure, and he sighed demonstratively. I understand everything, but my brother is officially divorced and took everything. Why did you leave this diary so demonstratively? It seems you're afraid to forget how much he loves you. And Shiyu flinched, and the knife in his hand scraped sharply across the plate, making an unpleasant scraping sound. He raised his head, his gaze icy. Wang Qi, watch your words. Wang Qi was startled by such unexpected anger. I'm just telling the truth. Are you angry? Me, I'm telling the truth about how he's trying to use the past to soften your heart. The past, and Shiyu laughed coldly, mentally defending me. And when Shu Zun jumped into the icy lake, where were you? Wang Qi's face turned pale. Then he staged it all himself. You don't know him, do you? He's a master of dissimulation. Enough, and Shiyu stood up decisively. The chair slid sharply across the floor. Towering over Wang Qi, he glared at him with a glare so icy he'd never shown before. The gesture was a clear warning. Wang Qi, don't make me regret agreeing to live with you. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Wang Qi in a state of confusion. His face was pale and lifeless. Standing in the garden, he felt his chest bursting with the weight. He'd always considered me the villain who'd ruined his relationship with Wang Qi, but now he doubted his every move. Wang Qi, in his moment of greatest weakness, he was the one who was so eager to slander me. Perhaps only now did he realize how deeply mistaken he had been. His gaze glazed over into the distance. He thought of me, Su Jiaheng, where are you now? After that fateful breakfast, and Shiyu's heart felt like it was overgrown with thorns. Wang Qi's lies were finally beginning to crumble. For the first time, he seriously suspected him. The words from that class reunion echoed in his memory, and Wang Qi's gentle manipulations now seemed unbearably false. Why did he always say I was pretending? And Shiyu stood in front of the office window. His fingers nervously caressed the rim of his coffee cup, and his eyes were dark and anxious. Finally, he changed his clothes, picked up the phone, and called his assistant. In a cold tone, he ordered, I want to know everything he's been doing all these years. 3 days later, an assistant placed a thick folder with a report on his desk. As soon as he opened the first page, he felt his face darken. All his worst suspicions were confirmed. Wang Qi turned out to be far more dangerous and calculating than he could have imagined. The report detailed his dubious connections with various people from previous years, and also uncovered evidence that Wang Qi had secretly been harming my business. The most shocking thing was that any major fights or deteriorations in our relationship occurred precisely when Wang Qi appeared in our lives. In high school, we were simply rivals. But once Wang Qi transferred to another school, my behavior toward Shiyu suddenly changed. When I was in college, I'd rush to see him in the hospital, and secretly shared his blood to save him. But immediately after he came to, Wang Qi would whisper to him, Su Jiaheng doesn't care about you, he didn't even come near you. After the wedding, every conflict, every quarrel between us flared up solely because of Wang Qi's intervention. I remembered other people's words, Sister N, Wang Qi is in a bad mood today, could you please keep him company? Or complaints about me allegedly putting drugs in someone's coffee. Did my brother really hate me and lie about me like that? The thought made his fists clench until his knuckles ached. It dawned on him what he didn't want to believe. Wang Qi had been leading him by the nose for 10 whole years. What happened next? This discovery completely changed his world. His friend Zhou Su found him with a gloomy expression and silently handed him the flash drive, saying, I accidentally met Wang Qi at a bar a couple of days ago. You should listen to this. After the background noise of the bar music, the recording faded away, and in the silence, Wang Qi's familiar voice could be clearly heard. Sitting in the VIP area, surrounded by his friends and laughing carefreely, Wang Qi boasted so loudly that Zhou Su couldn't help but listen to his words. And Shiyu, who is he? Just a convenient chess piece in my hands. Wang Qi waved his wine glass and grinned at his friend's puzzled looks. I told you, did you really think I loved him? If it weren't for his money and influence, would I have played out this love drama with him for so many years? Someone in the group laughed and asked, what about Su Jiaheng? To which Wang Qi responded with contempt, that Su Jiaheng is a complete fool, so upright, so stubborn. After all these years, he finally escaped. Taking another sip of wine, Wang Qi continued his drunken rant. You know what? That idiot in Shiyu believed every word I said. He honestly thought Su Jiaheng was making fun of me, when in fact, I was the one who provoked that old fight in the old hall. Su Jiaheng tried to protect me, but in the end, Shiyu personally beat him up back then, ha. Josu's face had gone pale as he recorded this conversation, and now Shiyu was listening to it for the first time. His mind felt blank. A deafening shock of reality robbed him of the ability to move. His fingers gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white and his eyes blazed with a wild, destructive rage. Wang Qi's true name now sounded like a death sentence to him. All those terrible false accusations from last day in the hall. It turns out that this is how my whole life fell apart. It was all because of Wang Qi. What angered me even more was that I'd effectively become an accomplice in his games. I recalled that family dinner and how I'd fallen helplessly in my own blood. Mentally returning to my stubbornness, I wanted to justify myself to him with reddened eyes. Wang Qi set this all up, but he thought I was simply slandering him. The self-destruction came from within, and before I could even explain everything, he himself completely destroyed my love for him. I stood up abruptly, poured the bottle of wine right onto the ground, and from several strong blows with my fist on the wall, I felt a sharp pain in the joints of my fingers. But I barely noticed. Compared to the pain in my wounded heart, what physical pain could mean. That same night, I took a bodyguard and had him take me back to the villa to knock on Wang Qi's door. When the door opened, Wang Qi didn't even have time to feign surprise before the bodyguard roughly grabbed him and threw him against the wall. My voice sounded cold, like a waking nightmare. Wang Qi's eyes widened in fear, his face rapidly turning red from lack of air as the bodyguard's grip tightened, and soon his skin began to turn blue. Shiyu, what are you doing? Let him go, he croaked. I laughed coldly and ordered the bodyguard to loosen his grip, then played the same audio recording on my phone. Wang Qi's face instantly turned white. No, it's not like that. Listen, I'll explain everything. He set me up. Wang Qi panicked and tried to grab my hand, but I pushed him away with contempt. My eyes were deathly cold. I threw the printed investigation report right in his face, and the white sheets scattered all over the floor. How do you explain this? Did someone set you up? Wang Qi swallowed convulsively, lowered his head, and ran his eyes over the lines, scattering pathetic excuses. Oh my God, he whispered, looking up at me, then hopefully. With one last heavy glance at him, I turned and left, feeling tension and heaviness warring in my back. Wang Qi was thrown back, his body shaking hysterically. A sharp bell rang, and he continued to claw at his neck, bursting into tears, deep down brimming with hatred. Mornings in Paris always brought a touch of warmth and comfort. Sunbeams streamed freely into the apartment through the large window. I sat on the sofa, nestled right next to the glass, holding a cup of hot coffee in my hands, gently blowing away the rising steam. Outside the window, Paris stretched out, bathed in bright light. The Eiffel Tower was visible in the distance, bathed in the rays of the morning sun. There was no Shiyu here, no Wang Qi, no past that had suffocated me for years, only I remained. I winced slightly as I took my first sip. The tip of my tongue felt a slight tingle. It turns out that's what true freedom tastes like. It was already my 3rd month living in Paris. I enrolled in design school, although I'd initially only attended regular painting workshops. All the depressive emotions pent up over the past few years finally found an outlet in creativity, and my own style became truly unique. The bold combination of Eastern and Western motifs soon caught the attention of the Academy's faculty dean. Su, your works are incredibly powerful, he praised me. The manager highly praised my sketches, especially the cut of the new dress. Like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon, I successfully received my certificate and smiled genuinely for the first time in a long time. Yes, I finally did it, and I finally stopped looking back at the past connected with Shiyu. With the director's approval, I rented a small studio in Montmartre to develop my own brand. I met Jiang Yunshu completely by chance at a design exhibition. He turned out to be a Chinese man raised in France whose family owned a luxury fabric business, and he himself was a talented designer. He stood at my booth for a long time that day. Finally, pointing to a long, dark red skirt, he asked, "Where did you get the inspiration for this outfit?" This skirt was my first piece after arriving in Paris, a period in which I felt broken and empty. Almost drowning in the pain of the past, I distilled that suffering into art. A skirt the color of dried blood was adorned with an embroidered golden butterfly, spreading its wings for flight. Jiang Yunshu, he introduced himself, noticing my surprise, and smiled warmly, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, designer Pu Jian." From that day on, he became a frequent guest in my studio. Sometimes he would bring rare fabric samples. He would simply sit silently next to me, watching me sketch. He never delved into my past or crossed any boundaries, but with his gentleness, he gradually helped me heal old wounds. One evening, Jiang Yunshu suddenly said, "The International Fashion Week is coming up in a month, and I want to introduce your brand there. You want us to participate together?" I froze, confused. This was the chance thousands of designers had dreamed of, and I looked up at him and found myself staring into his eyes. There was no pity or ulterior motive in them, only genuine admiration, support, and absolute faith in my talent. My eyes stung slightly, and I nodded in agreement. The next day, I was completely immersed in preparing for the show. Just before Fashion Week, I went to the famous avenue to buy accessories, but near the high-end boutique. Suddenly, I heard a familiar name. "Jia Heng," came a shocked voice from behind me. Turning around, I met Lin Yan's gaze. I met him completely by chance. Lin Yan, my old classmate from school, excitedly grabbed my hand. "Oh my God, is it really you? Why are you in Paris? You look." He looked me over in surprise. I no longer had the same fragility, only confidence. I knew he saw the change. Standing in front of me was not the downtrodden boy from my memories, but myself, in a simple white shirt and jeans, radiating a healthy calm. The most important thing was reflected in my eyes. There was no longer a fog of pain in them, only clarity and a firm belief in myself. Yes, because I had finally learned to value and love myself. I smiled softly. Lin Yan's eyes instantly turned red, and he suddenly hugged me tightly, saying, "How wonderful, how good it is to see you." I gently patted his back in the warm sunshine. On the day of the show, my collection was presented on the main stage. Models showcased the dresses I'd created, and the flowing red silk resembled living waves. While golden butterflies fluttered under the spotlight, the audience erupted in applause, and Jiang Yunshu, standing next to me, quietly said, "Look, everyone around you is captivated by your talent." Looking at the podium, I felt something inside me finally spread its wings. In that moment, I was no longer someone's shadow or the object of their ridicule. I was simply Su Jiaheng, a new me, finally finding myself. Meanwhile, Shiyu stood by the high window on the stairs, unaware that Wang Qi's revenge was nearing its climax. Wang Qi's business was collapsing at a catastrophic rate. In his eyes, it looked like an inevitable end. In just a week, the company faced a complete financial collapse. The mass exodus of partners, the freezing of bank accounts, and the cessation of supplies brought his father to the brink of a heart attack. The share price fell to an all-time low, wiping out the family's fortune. The Wang Qi family company was heading for bankruptcy. There wasn't a trace of joy on Shiyu's face, only a cold satisfaction that justice had finally prevailed. Glancing at another report, he gave one final, merciless order: "Keep up the pressure until the end. I want every trace of Wang Qi's business wiped out." Panicked, Wang Qi tried calling everywhere, but his numbers were blocked. Abandoned by all his former friends, he rushed to the gates of Shiyu's villa in utter despair, begging for mercy and bursting into tears. But Shiyu stood on the steps, staring at him as if he were nothing. "Shiyu, I know I was wrong. Please save the company," Wang Qi shouted, and Shiyu slowly squatted down and roughly grabbed his chin, forcing him to raise his head. "Wang Qi, do you know what I regret most?" he said quietly, smiling bitterly. That smile sent a chill down Wang Qi's spine. "I regret not having seen your true face sooner. Because of you, I lost the man who truly loved me, and now you'll pay for every tear." Wang Qi fell to his knees, whispering, "But I love you." And Shiyu silently pushed his hand away and turned away, leaving only one last phrase: "It's just a pity that your fake love isn't worth a dime." A month later, the Wang Group officially declared bankruptcy. Wang Fu was arrested on suspicion of fraud and financial misconduct, and Wang Qi sold off all his belongings but was still unable to cover his enormous debts. Standing before the gates of the former mansion, I realized. Looking at the court rulings, I finally broke down and collapsed onto the cold ground. And although I learned of this collapse much later, my soul felt empty and calm like standing water. All these people and events no longer had anything to do with me. Meanwhile, Shiyu stood before the office window, clutching a tablet, his eyes filled with a dull, ringing emptiness. The Wang family was completely destroyed and Wang Qi was left with nothing, but he couldn't fill the hole in his own chest. Even expensive drinks brought no relief. The alcohol burned his throat, but it couldn't drown out the icy cold inside. At an emergency meeting of the corporation's top management, the senior executives sat with pale faces, but he couldn't care less. With disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, he tossed a stack of documents onto the table. A small detail suddenly surfaced in his memory. I once taught you how to eat properly. The spacious conference room was deathly silent. No one was even afraid to breathe near him. After forcing his trembling assistant to gather up the papers, he didn't even glance at them. The harsh shouts sent the assistant scurrying out the door. Alone in the office, he pulled out the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out an old wedding photograph. In the picture, I was standing in a white suit and he was looking at me with his usual coldness. It was a truly pathetic sight. Looking back now, I realized he probably never truly appreciated what he had. And now that photograph had become a source of unbearable pain for him. That night, consumed by madness, he called 4 private detectives with a single question. Had they managed to find me? All he heard in response was that all my document records had been erased and my location was impossible to locate. He threw the phone at the wall in a rage and rushed into my old apartment, opening the door with a spare key. A light dust rose into the air. Everything here was steeped in memories. His fingers brushed against my favorite coat hanging over the back of the sofa. An architectural magazine I'd half-read lay on the coffee table, and my apron was still hanging on the hook in the kitchen, creating the illusion that I'd simply stepped out for a moment. Alcohol and bitter remorse washed over me simultaneously. The world before his eyes blurred. Su Jiaheng, I was wrong, please come back. His desperate voice echoed throughout the empty apartment, and at dawn he woke up lying on the cold floor. A raging headache tore at his temples, but the memories became frighteningly clear. Slowly rising, he took one last look around the abandoned house. Carefully closing the door behind him, he still entertained the illusion that somewhere deep in my soul, a spark of hope for forgiveness remained. If only he could find me, he would devote the rest of his life to atonement. But he didn't know the most important thing: some losses are irrevocable. Once I've decided to leave, there's no looking back. The cold Parisian winter wasn't enough to cool my determined heart, even though I was wrapped tightly in a warm wool coat. White steam from the hot drink settled on the window pane, turning the streetscape into blurry spots. The heating in the new studio hadn't been fixed yet, and I continued to draw the lines of the new collection, rubbing my frozen fingers. 10 weeks later, one of the most prestigious fashion houses sent me an official collaboration offer. Buried in work, I barely had time to sleep, standing next to the mannequin, fine-tuning the sketch. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door and Jiang Yunshu appeared, clutching the latest issue of the awards magazine. Snowflakes melted on his black coat and he carefully carried 2 glasses of hot coffee. The tip of his nose was red from the cold and tiny beads of moisture glistened on his eyelashes. I heard that one brilliant designer was up all night working again, he said with a smile, handing me a glass and accidentally brushing his fingers against my hand. Double caramel, exactly half milk. I was right. This is the perfect coffee flavor I developed for myself back in my student years. I was taken aback by the unexpectedness. While the drink was pleasantly warming my palms, Jiang Yunshu pointed out a funny detail on my scarf. Did you draw this yourself? Yes. Doesn't it look like it? He chuckled, coming closer. Leaning down, he pointed to an intricate pattern reminiscent of a bird's wing, and just then, as he approached, I suddenly noticed a small mole on his earlobe. Previously, she had been hidden behind thick strands of hair like a lost star in the night sky. Su Jiaheng, he called softly. The coffee in the glass began to cool. I quickly lowered my head, but he suddenly gently touched my lips with his finger, wiping away the beads of foam, and we froze, looking into each other's eyes. We truly found ourselves in the right place at the right time. The first winter snow was falling gently outside the studio window, and then, on the eve of the holidays, a heavy rain suddenly set in. I was standing at the entrance to the exhibition hall looking at the stormy weather in confusion, when suddenly a black umbrella came from behind me. Jiang Yunshu smiled, even though his right shoulder was already soaked by the rain. "Come on, my car is parked right next to me." The rain pounded the asphalt, turning the road into a mirror-like stream. Trying to walk carefully in my high heels, I slipped on the wet tiles and went spinning forward, falling straight into its embrace. Careful, he managed to grab me by the waist with one arm. The umbrella fell from my hands and rolled along the sidewalk, and the cold rainwater instantly soaked our clothes. I distinctly felt the warmth of his strong chest and the frantic rhythm of his heart. Thump thump. I didn't even immediately understand whose heartbeat was so deafeningly echoing in my ears. We tried to speak at the same time, but the next moment we froze in silence. Finally, Jiang Yunshu smiled slyly and suggested, "Would you like to count to 3 and speak at the same time?" Raindrops reflected in his dark eyes like twinkling stars. And then I remembered a recent sketch, a secretly embroidered golden wing on the lining of my new coat. My thoughts carried me somewhere far away. "We'll definitely go see the lavender fields right after Fashion Week," I recalled his recent promise. The blossoming season in Provence was set to begin next month. The rain outside was gradually subsiding, giving way to soft moonlight. While preparing for Milan Fashion Week, the lights in our studio stayed on until the early hours. I managed to catch a cold from constantly drinking iced coffee and working in drafts. Waking up in the middle of the night in my hotel room, I felt someone gently lifting me, holding warm medicine to my lips. "Yunshu, what time is it?" I asked hoarsely, still half asleep. He was sitting next to me on the bed, wearing a long, wrinkled shirt, looking tired and haggard. There were shadows under his eyes from lack of sleep, and the fever-reducing pills were neatly lined up on the nightstand. "You were delirious for a whole half-hour and kept trying to throw off the blanket," he shook his head reproachfully. He gently patted my sweaty forehead with a damp towel, never letting go of my hand. The sleep had finally left me. I just had a nightmare," I breathed out quietly. Jiang Yunshu leaned so close I could count his eyelashes. "Su Jiaheng, I am ready to heal all your scars." After my countless complaints and nervous breakdowns over the past few months, he remained by my side, patiently weathering every storm, and this unconditional support suddenly brought tears to my eyes. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. All that deeply hidden pain, resentment, and heaviness from the past years had finally broken through the dam, spilling out. Jiang Yunshu held me tightly, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Men are allowed to cry too," he whispered softly. "Cry if it hurts. We still have so many bright dresses and sunny days in Provence ahead of us." Indeed, the sun shone much brighter over Provence than in rainy Paris. Standing amidst a vast purple field, Jiang Yunshu watched with a smile as the local children surrounded me, trying to help me arrange a bouquet. I clumsily attempted to tie the stems, but they only laughed. "I've got something in store for the head designer," his voice said behind me. I turned around and he smiled slyly. "Now close your eyes." I obediently closed my eyes, and when I opened them, a simple, slightly crooked ring woven from a sprig of lavender graced my finger. Taking out my phone, I snapped a photo as a souvenir. He jokingly complained that he looked too ridiculous in the photo, but I just laughed, grabbed his wrist tightly, and pulled the real gift out of his pocket. The silver ring was engraved with a French phrase meaning, "my spring." Jiang Yunshu tried to put it on, while somewhere in the distance, a child's happy laughter rang out. Purple blossoms swayed in the summer breeze. I stood by the open studio window, clutching a golden invitation from the world's leading jewelry house, Yunny, which had offered me the position of chief artistic director. Jiang Yunshu pushed open the door, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee, and noticing my thoughtful expression, kindly asked what I was dreaming about again. I snapped out of my reverie and gently ran my finger over the embossed letters of the invitation. I thought I'd never be able to enjoy life again. He handed me a fine porcelain cup. "Are you afraid of new heights?" I chuckled softly as I sipped my coffee. "No, I'm just thinking about how wonderful it is to finally live in the present." Meanwhile, a new day was blooming outside the window, full of light and endless possibilities. I pressed the shutter button. My gaze was no longer soft but steely. I had no intention of hiding anymore. As the plane touched down in a city familiar from childhood, a strange feeling of dizziness washed over me for a second. 3 years had passed. The airport had barely changed, but my own life had been turned upside down. "Mr. Su, welcome home," the assistant who met me at the ramp beamed with joy. "Mr. Meng told me to take you straight to the hotel so you can rest from your journey, and we'll discuss all the details of our cooperation tomorrow." I simply smiled and obediently followed him to the car. Outside the window, rapidly receding streets flashed by. Familiar high-rise buildings occasionally flashed with bright neon signs. Once all my pain and endless hatred were concentrated in this city. But now it all seemed like a forgotten book, gathering dust on a distant shelf. As it turned out later, Shiyu was at an important meeting when news of my return reached him. The assistant who burst into the conference room barely had time to utter a few words before the pen fell from Shiyu's weakened fingers, leaving greasy ink stains on the papers. Upon hearing the confirmation, he abandoned the meeting and ran headlong out of the building. His car was speeding toward the Uni Group office building. As he pulled into the parking lot, I was just getting out of the black sedan, heading toward the revolving glass doors. I was wearing an elegant white suit. The perfect cut accentuated my broad shoulders and long legs, and my entire appearance emanated a calm, unclouded radiance. My breathing was even and measured. Jiang Yunshu tried to take a step toward me, but Shiyu blocked his path. "Step aside," he hissed icily. Jiang Yunshu didn't even flinch. "He doesn't want to see you." And Shiyu's fists clenched until his knuckles turned white and his eyes gleamed with unshed pain. "Who the hell are you? Mind your own business," he snapped. Jiang Yunshu merely chuckled coldly. "And you, the man who ruined his life with his own hands, what right do you have to approach him?" These words struck more sharply than any knife, piercing his heart. And Shiyu swallowed convulsively, but there was nothing he could say in response. Catching some movement, I turned my head slightly in their direction. At that moment, Shiyu caught his breath. He thought he saw me looking right at him, but the next moment, my gaze slid past him, indifferent and detached, as if he were a complete stranger, completely unrelated to his past. I turned away and continued walking, and Shiyu's car idled gently and he stood motionless. A deathly cold permeated his entire body. It finally dawned on him I didn't even hate him anymore. "If you have any conscience left, leave him alone," Jiang Yunshu snapped before following me. "Who do you think you are?" And Shiyu seethed, feeling his insides crumble. "And who I am is no longer important. The main thing is that he's happy now. He's finally learned to live again without you." Night fell on the city, and Shiyu was left standing all alone. In that old apartment where I once lived, the third-floor windows were dark and empty. He couldn't even turn on the light. His trembling fingers tried to find a lighter and cigarettes in his pocket, but his hands wouldn't obey. Finally, he sank to his knees, exhausted, leaning his back against the cold wall. He silently whispered my name, but the cold night wind carried his words away into the void. Meanwhile, Shiyu stood in the lobby of a luxury hotel. His fingers clutched the phone convulsively. For the past 3 days, he'd been frantically trying to find out my schedule and learned that I'd be attending a private dinner tonight. He probably didn't fully understand why he'd come here, whether out of hope or simply out of fear of losing sight of me forever. The elevator doors slid open silently and I stepped out, leaning lightly on Jiang Yunshu's arm. I was wearing a formal dark suit and an expensive brooch adorned my lapel, glittering brightly in the spotlight. Seeing me, Shiyu felt his heart pound wildly in his chest. He forced himself to step forward, "Jaya," but my feet didn't even slow down. I slowly turned my head, giving him an appraising look that held no anger or reproach, only absolute, icy emptiness. And this calm made me feel at ease. "Mr. N," I said in the even, polite voice of a business partner. And Shiyu's face twisted, and he instinctively leaned forward, reaching out his hand as if hoping to catch the phantom smoke. Jiang Yunshu frowned warily, shielding me with his shoulder. I gently touched his arm. "Yunshu, stay in the car for now. I'll be free soon." Nodding obediently, Jiang Yunshu gave Shiyu a warning glance and left. Only the two of us remained in the spacious hall, surrounded by oppressive silence. "Jaya Heng," Shiyu whispered, struggling to get the words out. "I have so much to tell you." I calmly met his gaze, showing no emotion. "Speak." His fingers trembled nervously. He'd probably replayed this dialogue 1,000 times in his fantasies, but now, facing me, he was completely at a loss. "Forgive me," he finally breathed out. In the silence of the hall, his voice sounded broken and pitiful. "I'm sorry for everything, for that birthing room, for the birthday, for the divorce, for everything I ruined." The sound of his words fell like heavy drops on the polished marble floor. Kneeling right at my feet, he whispered, "Please forgive me." The people around us held their breath. Bright lights fell upon us from above, creating a surreal scene. The former all-powerful corporation president was kneeling like a stray dog washed ashore. And I simply looked down at him, feeling no pain or longing in my chest. All those scars, crushed feelings, and sleepless nights filled with tears were left far behind, burned away by time. Time really does erase dust, and Shiyu, I realized long ago, some things can't be fixed with apologies. He raised his head and looked at me with tear-stained, reddened eyes. "Is it really over between us?" His voice trembled, clinging to the last illusion. I looked at him silently for a moment, then smiled slightly. That smile was completely pure, full of long-awaited liberation. My future had long been built without his participation. I turned around abruptly and wanted to leave, but he desperately grabbed my wrist. "Jiaheng, I beg you, give me one more chance, just one." I stopped without turning around. "There's no turning back, have you really not realized that yet?" I once truly believed that if I loved him enough, I would one day melt his icy heart. But now I knew for sure true love shouldn't bring so much pain. Slowly but surely, I freed my hand from his grip, and Shiyu remained kneeling, watching my retreating figure. The skin on my wrist still retained the phantom warmth of his fingers, but I no longer cared. Leaving the building, I got into the car waiting at the entrance to see Jiang Yunshu. Small drops of rain fell quietly outside the car window. "How are you?" he asked softly, pulling me closer. "Everything's fine," I replied, feeling a long-awaited peace settle over me. The black sedan pulled away smoothly and disappeared into the night lights of the big city. The figure of the once mighty Shiyu lingered behind, shrinking in size until it was completely lost in the dust of the road. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a chilly autumn night was falling. Wang Qi sat on a made bed in a cheap hotel, staring blankly at his phone. The news feeds were full of headlines. The Wang Group had been officially declared bankrupt, its debts were running into the billions, and Wang Fu had been arrested on fraud charges and would face a prison sentence. With a hysterical scream, he threw his smartphone at the wall, and the plastic casing shattered into pieces. The former spoiled rich kid, accustomed to luxury, now couldn't even afford a decent place to live and could only choke on his own tears on the floor. His expensive silk pajamas had long since become soiled, and his once fashionable diamond bracelets had become useless, fragile junk. In the morning, desperately trying to cover the stains of tears and sleeplessness with the remnants of his foundation, he pulled on his only decent suit. He hobbled toward the group headquarters in high heels. Security guards tried to block his way, but he merely grinned hysterically. "Take me to him, I have information about Su Jiaheng." 5 minutes later, he was pushed into that very office with the panoramic windows, and Shiyu stood with his back to the door, staring motionless at the city. Even hearing a rustling sound, he didn't turn his head. "Shiyu!" Wang Qi fell to his knees, trying to crawl closer, but Shiyu stepped aside in disgust. "You said something about Jiaheng, spill it." The icy tone made Wang Qi flinch. Bursting into tears, he babbled, "I didn't mean to, it was all an accident. Shiyu, believe me, I've only ever loved you." And Shiyu slowly turned around and looked at him with a murderous gaze. Looking down at him, Shiyu felt only icy disgust and dull anger. Not a single spark of warmth remained in his eyes, only cold contempt for the man kneeling before him. "Do you know how pathetic you look right now?" he said quietly with a bitter smile. "You just make me sick." "No, that's not true," Wang Qi cried out in despair. He shook his head frantically, clutching at his last straw. "It's all Su Jiaheng's fault. He must have slandered me to you. Shiyu, have you forgotten how good things were between us before?" "Shut up," and Shiyu cut him off. Grabbing Wang Qi's chin with a brutal grip, he threw a thick stack of documents onto the table in disgust. The folder hit the wood with a dull thud and photographs scattered out like a fan. The photographs captured Wang Qi's countless intimate encounters with a wide variety of people over the past few years, everything he did for money and influence at the behest of others. And Shiyu's cold gaze cut sharper than any knife. Wang Qi's entire body shook. After that fateful night, his life had spiraled downwards into the darkest abyss. He found himself in an underground club from which there was no return, confronted with the brutal mores of the new world. Gritting his teeth until his palms ached, he heard the bar owner's mocking voice. "You used to be a spoiled brat, but now let's see what you're really made of." Thick tobacco smoke filled the stuffy room as a man roughly pinned him to the sofa. They say you used to hang out with the elite. Come on, smile a little faster. The nasty voice grated on his ears. Wang Qi tried to force a semblance of a smile, but the next moment he received a heavy blow to the face. Spitting blood onto the threadbare carpet, he felt the last vestiges of his human dignity being completely erased. And if not for Shiyu's sudden death, he would never have found himself at the very bottom of this nightmare. Meanwhile, a deathly silence reigned in the main conference room of Incorporation. Horror was evident on the shareholders' faces, and the financial reports on the tables left no room for hope. The company's losses for the last quarter reached an astronomical 3.7 billion. If this continues, bankruptcy is inevitable. And Shiyu leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling as if he were discussing a completely foreign business. A wave of panic and outraged cries swept through the room. Are you crazy? This is your grandfather's life's work. Don't you care about the family empire? But Shiyu slowly rose from his seat. His long coat flew open with a sudden movement. Without a word, he walked out of the conference room to the sound of a broken cup and the shouts of enraged creditors. He couldn't care less. His own world had long since reached a dead end. Late at night, his car pulled up to a dark embankment. He rolled down the window and let the icy autumn wind ruffle his tousled hair. On the seat next to him lay a worn paper bag. Inside, neatly stored, were all the clippings and catalogs of my design work over the past few years, from my triumph at Paris Fashion Week to my exhibitions in Shanghai. With trembling fingers, he pulled out one of the photographs. My social media page glowed on my smartphone screen. The last post was made just 3 days ago. The new season of New Horizons is starting soon. Thank you to everyone who believes in me. The photo showed Jiang Yunshu and I standing on the banks of a picturesque river, warming each other with our intertwined fingers, and Shiyu's eyes stung. The speedometer needle on the dashboard was rapidly climbing. The dark surface of the river reflected the pale moonlight, sparkling like diamonds on the hem of my wedding gown. And in the silence of the car, Shiyu spoke my name sincerely for the first time in a long time. Hands jerked the steering wheel to the side. The black sedan veered off the road, crashing through the guardrail. The heavy vehicle plunged into the icy water, instantly disappearing beneath the dark surface. And the morning news was full of breaking news. At dawn today, a car was discovered in a suburban area that had fallen into a river. According to traffic police, the owner of the wrecked car is Shiyu, the general director of Incorporation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city in a damp basement, Wang Qi frantically scrolled through the news feed on his shattered phone until a hysterical, insane laugh pierced the room. Dead. He's finally dead, ha 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 ha. Tears of joy and despair streamed down his face, washing away the cheap makeup and revealing the full extent of his decline. The cold metal of a knife lay on the table, but he no longer needed it. His revenge had been exacted by someone else. The investigator gloomily examined the case file at the police station. The brake lines were intentionally cut before the vehicle left. This is not an accident, but a planned murder. The evidence quickly focused on Wang Qi. CCTV cameras captured a man wearing a cap pulled down over his eyes hovering near Shiyu's car 3 days before the accident. When the police burst into his hideout, printed photographs from my journals, cut, scratched, destroyed in a fit of mad envy, strewn among the scattered tools and boxes. Wang Qi didn't even try to resist, only grinning madly into the cameras. You came just in time. Look, I ruined all his favorite memories just like he ruined my life, he shouted at the guards. At the trial, he was dressed in prison garb, but a distant smile still lingered on his face. It's just a shame the man responsible for his ruined life died too soon. When the judge announced the verdict, there were no relatives in the courtroom. All those who once surrounded the wealthy heir with luxury had long since disappeared, leaving him alone to face retribution. As the judge lowered the gavel, Wang Qi laughed hysterically for the last time, staring at the empty ceiling. But in response, he heard only the ringing silence of his own loneliness. Official notice of the liquidation of the Yuan family's assets was sent to Paris. Meanwhile, at the old headquarters, a distant relative willing to sign the inheritance papers was found with great difficulty. On the day of my show in Paris, it was raining heavily, but the air in the spacious auditorium was one of triumph. A young assistant backstage helped me adjust my cuff, noticing the silver bracelet glittering on my wrist. 3 months later, my new couture collection, entitled Renaissance, has officially conquered the catwalks of Europe. The lead model gracefully walked in a luxurious scarlet gown, embroidered with gold thread in the shape of a phoenix spreading its wings. Amid a storm of applause and admiring glances, I stood backstage when Jiang Yunshu carefully handed me a cup of warm tea. "You didn't sleep all night again, workaholic," he smiled softly, straightening the collar of my jacket. Sunbeams streamed through the panoramic windows of the Parisian studio, casting soft shadows on the desk littered with sketches. I took a sip of my hot drink, gazing at the Seine sparkling in the distance. Familiar footsteps sounded behind me. Jiang Yunshu's warm hands gently rested on my shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" His voice was as gentle as a spring breeze. I turned and met his devoted, radiant gaze. In the golden light of day, his figure seemed a reliable support against any storm. His eyes still shone with the same pure sincerity as on the day of our first meeting. Glancing at the graceful silhouette of the Eiffel Tower outside the window, I suddenly realized all the scars of the past had finally healed. Suddenly, Jiang Yunshu took out an elegant velvet box from his pocket and, gently lifting the lid, showed me a flawless diamond ring. "Su Jiaheng," his voice was quiet but confident. "I'm not a master of grandiose words of love, but I want to prove with every action that your future deserves the utmost care, every second." The sun's rays tangled in my hair and the diamond on my ring sparkled like 1,000 sparks. True happiness doesn't require flashy decorations. The only thing that matters is the one holding your hand. And our hearts beat in unison. Holding out my hand to him, I felt a hot tear fall onto the cool facet of a precious stone. "Yes," I whispered. Our modest wedding took place on the picturesque hills of Montmartre. No ostentatious luxury, just my closest friends and family. I was wearing a formal suit with subtle gold-embroidered butterflies on the cuffs that shimmered in the sun. Jiang Yunshu stood under a spreading tree, waiting for me. When it came time to exchange rings, his fingers trembled slightly with excitement, almost dropping the ring onto the grass, causing the guests to laugh warmly and kindly. I carefully placed the ring on his finger and, smiling slyly, lightly touched his cheek with my lips. "Don't worry so much, Mr. Jiang." A long, bright life lay ahead of us, a life to which we had yet to get used. The leaves above us rustled in the wind, and in our pockets lay the marriage certificate, our silent seal of destiny. Late one night, having fallen asleep right at my desk while checking the final drawings of a new collection, I woke up to a feeling of warmth. Someone had thoughtfully thrown a soft blanket over my shoulders. Blinking sleepily, I raised my head to see Jiang Yunshu sitting quietly across from me with a cup of coffee in his hands. Noticing my awakening, he smiled kindly and pushed a brand new sketchbook towards me, a birthday present with a golden butterfly artfully engraved on the cover. "So, great designer, are you ready to conquer Paris completely?" He winked, helping me to my feet. Outside the window, the city roared at night, welcoming the dawn of a new era. This one night, complete with peace and warmth, was enough to heal the pain of an entire life.